Save a prayer for those who care. I keep the faith, but no one will dare to hold my hand until the end. When all the pieces fall into place, my body's weak, the mind is tired, but there's a fire that heals deep inside. I close my eyes and stretch my soul to gather up the nerve to carry on. Daisies everywhere.
Welcome, Anna.
Thanks, Philippos. Great to be here.
I'm very happy that you are joining Marvel Talks. You were highly recommended by a person who is highly recommended. So I'm really happy to have you on board.
Fantastic.
Let me say a few things to our viewers who are slowly gathering before the stage in the various platforms about Anna. Anna is a community curator, a LinkedIn educator and storyteller, and she's driven to help individuals and businesses to build better and more authentic connections in a digital world. She co-founded the LinkedIn Local Movement, an initiative to connect offline in offline and real life, and the movement spreads to 90 and more countries in 22 months and has since been validated by LinkedIn. Anna also empowers entrepreneurs and brands looking to create and scale their own communities. She has a unique background in social media and recruitment and is an accomplished LinkedIn trainer and speaker. Is this an accurate snapshot of what you do, Anna?
Yes, it is. Yep. Very well said.
Would you like to add something?
Probably what isn't in that bio is the book that is coming in a matter of weeks. So I could almost say author or co-author, as is the case of this book, but I'm not quite there yet. So anybody, if they're watching a live replay in 3 weeks' time, perhaps we could add that.
That's fantastic. I have it down the line. Is one of my points coming up soon. So let me ask you about one of the major, let's say, points in your journey. Tell us about the LinkedIn Local. I'm very, very curious to find out about this incredible initiative that it took the world by storm.
It did. It was a flame that set the world alight, I think. It began, LinkedIn Local began as on a complete whim, entirely by accident, one day when I added a post to the news feed to say I was going to set up a LinkedIn Local meetup in my local city, which is a city called Coffs Harbour in Australia. And to put that in a bit of context, we're a city of 70,000 people. So it was not a big city. It was not New York or London or anywhere that you expect movements to begin and creativity to come from. But it was a bit of innovation that could come from anywhere, and it did. So, but the post I put up was well received locally. On that post, I met a few people who became major co-creators of the LinkedIn Local movement: Alexandra Galvez, Eric Eklund, and Swish Goswami. So with 4 cities, 4 countries, 4 people, began what we just hashtagged LinkedIn Local. And this was before hashtags were really a thing on LinkedIn. And it literally spread like wildfire. I think we were 96 countries at the 2-year mark. And it was just literally blowing up in the news feed everywhere, and amazing to watch. The 4 of us, along with many others who helped along the way, managed to host community and provided all the mentoring and a method in order to build those local groups and those local communities. And truly amazing experience. It helped me very much kind of find my purpose and my why, which was fantastic. And at around the 2-year mark, it was validated by LinkedIn. They released some terms giving all LinkedIn users access to the LinkedIn Local logo that people can see up, and a framework within to work with. So at that point, it became very much open source. Our work was done, and we moved on. Apart from a lot of us still run our own groups, and it very much still exists on LinkedIn, and lots of communities still meet where they can. Obviously, in the last few months, that has meant a lot of groups have shifted to online platforms for online networking, but very much still alive and well in a lot of countries and a lot of cities throughout the world.
So with the COVID situation, clearly events in the real world are now postponed. Do you see any activity with LinkedIn Local, or as you have said before, it's something that...
Yeah, I've attended, and one of the interesting things about that is people used to say to me, "Oh, if you're ever in Baltimore, please come to one of our events." So I know the host in Baltimore very well, and she messaged me. She said, "We're now online. Now you can come." And sure enough, I went and spoke at their online event, which is fantastic. The Austin one. There's a lot of cities, Vancouver, a lot of cities that are just continuing to do monthly or even weekly in some cases online groups. They tend to perhaps be a bit smaller just because the Zoom, I know a lot of people are using Zoom. You obviously don't need to use Zoom, but a lot of people are running slightly smaller groups and really engaging with people that perhaps couldn't engage with the offline events. So I think it's been an interesting experience for a lot of people in any community sense, not just LinkedIn Local, to see the shift, the demand, how that changes. And there's a lot of innovation coming up, I think, with online events and a lot of platforms and round tables that people are doing. So whilst it's an awful situation, and whilst I'm a big proponent of face-to-face connection in order to build relationships at the moment, that's tricky. So we've got to make do with, I guess the circumstances that we're in.
Is it not an irony to hold the LinkedIn Local event digitally?
Well, yes. But if it still connects local businesses, then perhaps why not? And it connects. What was really interesting about Baltimore was they really brought in, they had, I think, 5 speakers, so 4 local companies plus just me talking at the end, just about LinkedIn Local. But they had 4. They had the mascot for their local, I think, their baseball team. They had oysters are a big part of Baltimore, so they had somebody doing an oyster shucking demonstration. They were supposed to have held the event in a mead factory, which is a bit like a brewery. And so they actually had the owner of that doing a tour just with their phone, taking them around, which is what would have happened on the night. So it did really have a local feel to it. It was about the city. It was about various aspects of the city that they often do at their offline events, and just anybody could join that online. Primarily, most of the attendees were local, but of course there was an opportunity for anybody like me to join without. So yes, there is an irony, but there are ways in which to do it that can help showcase and partner with local businesses.
How does someone begin to implement a LinkedIn Local event? We had that conversation, remember?
We have, yeah. Look, I think, first of all, I think there needs to be, and I think this is true of any community, that you have to feel, I guess, the need and the pain yourself in order to have the drive to go and do what you're going to build. And in my case, and I think for a lot of LinkedIn Local hosts, networking either frightens them or they just, particularly traditional networking that's very sales-based, that's very walk into a room, hand around your business cards, don't actually talk to anybody or build any relationships. Hosts tend to want to avoid that type of connection, and they wanted to create community. They want people to come. The tagline we've always used is get to know the people behind the LinkedIn profiles and connect at a human level. And I think that having that desire to do that is really special. So first of all, that is step number 1. Step number 2 is to actually talk about it in the newsfeed initially and just ask if there's demand for it. Put up a post on LinkedIn. I'm thinking about organizing this. Is this something you'd be interested in attending? Tag some local connections in the comments and see what kind of response you get. Because from there, I know people who've done that, who've found co-hosts on that post, they've found venues, they've found all sorts of either great responses, or if there isn't a huge response to a post like that, they know that they need to go and find some co-hosts and other people to help them spread the word. So, and from there, it's simply just about getting your local LinkedIn connections together offline at a suitable time and place, as and when perhaps it's socially distanced currently, or an online one at the moment.
I recall our discussion on, well, in your city as well, on what's the appropriate size for organizing such event. And I understand from you that, quite interestingly, even small towns or cities with like 70,000, and you have less, your population is less than in the city where I live, in Limassol. But I understand from you that it's not so much only about metropolis and about organizing such events in big
Absolutely.
locations.
No, and I mean, we all build connections locally. Very much at the moment in particular, we're very dependent on supporting local businesses. And so that drive is there. Certainly people want to help their neighbor, help their, their people within their local community and support that. But we've often seen smaller cities do well with LinkedIn Local. Larger cities do too. They tend to just have a specific part of the city that they meet in, be it downtown or outlying areas, and it works in that as long as you're not going for that sort of 100-person event, which, by the way, are fine. You just don't tend to get a lot of, you don't get to obviously talk to everybody that's there. But I mean, my events, I've continued to run events up until the beginning of COVID, so almost 3 years, and I will restart again soon here in Australia. But my events are typically around about 25 people each time. They're small. They don't need to be any bigger. It makes it very simple to organize. It makes venues very easy to find. And it doesn't create a huge amount of work. Larger events do have the added, the additional work in terms of, either finding larger venues or things like that. So it's an initiative that really does work at a very local level. And larger cities too, of course, you're going to get the demand. But I think for a lot of what I have tended to find, not just in my own community, but a lot of other communities, is LinkedIn Local in a smaller community suddenly makes LinkedIn relevant. LinkedIn becomes more relevant to people in smaller cities because suddenly there's a way to find people and a way to connect, whereas previously it's this global platform, but they're so used to doing business locally. What's the relevance to use LinkedIn? LinkedIn Local actually brings that. There's the online and the offline together, and it binds those relationships much better, and in a much more thorough way than perhaps just online can. And so I think it suddenly makes LinkedIn very relevant to a lot of local businesses.
I always thought that the ideal way of utilizing LinkedIn is similar to a tango dance. Basically, it's a tango between the offline and online. In what sense? The people you meet online, ideally, you need to pursue an offline connection or interaction because we are human beings. The real deep human connections are much more likely to come about and to flourish when we actually meet up face to face, as you said. So the people you meet online, ideally, you should seek for opportunities to go for a coffee or meet up with them offline as well. And the other way as well. So the people you meet offline, as you said, with the local or in general, then you find them online, let's say on LinkedIn, so as to continue nurturing and warming up the relationship that began offline. And by doing that, you are much more likely to, let's say, do some business together in the future and not let the whole situation die. So ideally, it should be a tango between offline and online. And I think you are correct that the LinkedIn Local takes that concept to the best possible level that there is, to my view. But talking about LinkedIn, Because behind all of this, the backbone of the building of communities based on either LinkedIn local or in any other way, it's LinkedIn. And I know that you are a coach, you are an educator, you are very well versed with the LinkedIn ecosystem. I wanted to take some time discussing about it because it's a very, very important platform for business. What makes LinkedIn different than other platforms? What do you think makes it? Is it unique?
I think it's largely business and human focus, and a lot of people will see, and it's probably a little more relevant from in a business to business space. Although I think that is changing quite significantly, but it obviously has I think it's a more purposeful platform. Other social media platforms perhaps don't have as much purpose, or people don't perhaps identify with that purpose, and there can be a lot of noise. Whereas a platform like LinkedIn, it really allows people to build those relationships that are all those, as I call them, virtual villages, to actually support them and help them in their career, or in their life, in terms of either making friends, forming collaborations, finding people that are going to inspire you, that can potentially mentor you, career opportunities, and an opportunity to build some thought leadership and share ideas and to learn as well. And I think that can happen on a lot of other social media platforms, and probably more so in other industries. You can do that better than others on other platforms, but LinkedIn really has that ability to help people achieve that, that sense of, the virtual village around them, or that community, and building that network. And that can get quite lost on other platforms for some users. And so I think that's one of the reasons that it is a great platform. And it's got, it's, in terms of tools and features, it's got a lot of functions for that. There's certainly room for improvement, in my opinion, particularly with things like LinkedIn groups. But it's a very growing and thriving platform, and something that you can, if you invest the time in, you get a huge return. Whereas the time spent perhaps on other social media platforms you don't always get a return on that investment.
How is it that some people on LinkedIn post and they have all these engagements, all these interactions, and others post and get nothing? Do you have an explanation?
Look, there's a lot of things it's dependent on, and there's been a lot of changes to the algorithm recently. But getting started, you tend not to get a lot of engagement, and that can simply be the algorithm works almost like in a building blocks. So you're actually adding bricks to a wall, and you need to build up a bit of a reputation in order for the delivery of your post to go a little bit further. Certain types of content do better than others. That's had quite a bit of a shift recently. In terms, I don't think native video is doing as well as it used to, and that's been a change to the algorithm that's happened. And when you look at somebody who gets really high views on videos, they tend to be people who have quite large followings, potentially over the 50,000, even over 100,000 followers, and that's where those views come from. But having said that, if you've got a good engaged network, say of 1,000 or 2,000 people, and those people are active, they're within that they're going to be interested in the content that you're putting out, you can still get a lot of really good engagement that perhaps isn't related on views, but is more related on relationships and generating leads. High views don't always translate to lead generation or achieving the purpose that you're there to achieve.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to what your purpose is on LinkedIn, and whether your activity on LinkedIn is aligned with your purpose. Because you are correct. In the past, I remember there were some people who were extremely active, posting all sorts of things about traveling, about cats, about food, about so. In my mind, it was clear that they were going for as many different types of followers from different countries and industries and worldviews as possible, but without having a specific niche. So and my question to you is it a good thing to have a niche on LinkedIn in terms of how you craft your message? Is it a proper thing, or is it a double-edged sword?
Look, I think having a niche message in marketing is really important on LinkedIn or anywhere else. I mean, a lot of people who are perhaps doing very viral videos, they get paid to create videos like that, and they're looking for clients who they can create those videos for. So they have professional videography. They have what you and I don't have, which is, a webcam and a set of headphones that, just what you have lying around at home. But having said that, I think people that I've seen on LinkedIn it's the ones that aren't so polished that you often end up private messaging or building a relationship with. And whilst the viral ones, they're fun to watch and you might get a bit out of them and you might get a few tips and learn something, they're not always going to translate to leads. It depends what it is. If it's designed just for clickbait, then it may get the likes and the comments and the visibility, and people can claim, oh well, I had 1 million views on my post, and that's great. But it depends, if it's a message that resonates, that's part of your purpose, that's part of who you are, or the message that you're trying to get out there, then that's great. If it's simply just to have a cat do a cool trick, then is it helping you or not? I mean, perhaps you're there for fun, and that's great. So but I try to really encourage people to look at the number of likes, the number of comments that you're getting, and ultimately the number of good connections that are in your target market, and relationships, and ultimately leads.
What about people who seek instant gratification? Is LinkedIn a place for them?
No, there's no. You can't hack LinkedIn. There's no growth hack.
Please go on.
Well, it's not, because people, because it's a platform built for people. And it's a platform for that reason built around relationships. And you can't build a relationship with somebody by putting up one video and expecting that everybody's going to flock and do wonderful things. It's there. The instant gratification it rarely works on LinkedIn. It is a network you need to cultivate, the relationships you need to build. If you invest the time, there's a huge return on that, but you do need to be willing to invest that time.
I think that it's very easy as well to rub people the wrong way on LinkedIn, in the sense that, there are many people who send spam messages. There are people who simply use bots just to sell you services. But I think if our purpose is to get into LinkedIn and immediately begin selling, I'm not quite convinced that this is a correct mindset for winning on LinkedIn. On the other hand, I think LinkedIn requires the long game approach.
It really does. A lot of the bots that people are using they aren't allowed. They actually break the user agreement. So first of all, they're not allowed, and secondly, they when you receive one, because you can smell it a mile off. I mean, I have people who message me to say, we can use LinkedIn and generate 20 leads a day for you. And I sort of respond to that, well, have you actually read my profile? Because as you can see, I'm also a LinkedIn trainer. And what's interesting about that is for some people that actually continues and they keep sending you those messages. And it's like, you clearly aren't reading my profile. You clearly aren't reading any of this. And you are just literally sending 100 messages. You're picking a random people, 100 messages a day, hoping that one or two are going to come back and buy whatever it is that you're offering. And if you do that at very high volume, probably somebody will. Is it the type of client you want to work with? It's certainly not the type of client I want to work with. But having said that, people are certainly doing it, and it can work in some industries better than others. But particularly the messaging that I share, and I would say this to anybody in business or, job seekers as well, you want to carefully craft the message that you're sending out. And if the message has been, sent by a robot or it's automated, I've heard some horror stories of people who've had automation tools and the wrong thing has been sent to the wrong person, which has caused quite deep offense. And that's ultimately your brand that's at stake to that. So whilst you might think you don't have the time, I'd consider how much time it's going to take to build a reputation that's fallen simply because you've tried to take some shortcuts.
I think it makes sense, and I would add that the higher the price of the ticket, then the higher the chances that you will create damage by automating your message. What I mean is that, especially if you're targeting the business-to-business world and decision makers who will decide whether or not they will hire you for a high-value service, I think that's a completely wrong way to approach LinkedIn. I mean, as you said, LinkedIn is about building relationships and not about a transactional type of mindset that will not get you really, really far. And I had worse stories. I received one day, a few months ago, I received a message from somebody telling me, "Dear John, we can help you save on your electricity." The name was wrong. So, "Dear John," I mean, if you are going to use a bot, at least learn how to use it correctly. So there are horror stories. I agree with you.
Oh, there are.
Listen, how is it possible to reach the decision maker in your target industry on LinkedIn? Because it seems that the world is so much smaller now. I mean, you scroll on your LinkedIn newsfeed and you see a post by your ideal client. Maybe he's a second connection. Let's say he's the CEO of that huge chain of supermarkets, okay? And it's there. You can see the profile right there, and you can be tempted to think, why don't I buy a message and send a message to this guy and ask for a meeting? What I mean is that the decision makers seem to be really within our reach, the decision makers in the industries where we want to sell. How easy or feasible is it to approach your ideal decision makers?
Look, it's very feasible, and there's a few things that I would recommend to someone to do first and foremost is you can send a connection request to anybody within reason, unless they have the settings on that you need to have their email address. But that tends to be more the higher end influencers like Tony Robbins or Bill Gates that seem to have those settings. You can send a connection request to anybody on a free account. I would, first of all, personalize it. And what I mean by that is explain why you're connecting, perhaps use something that's in their profile. So secondly, you need to have read their profile. And, whether it's, you're keen to connect with other people in the industry, or perhaps there's something that in their profile that you have in common. The one I use is Jane Jackson, who's a career coach here in Australia. I think on her profile she has, if you're going to send me a connection request, mention golf, cats, or that you want help with your career, and I will gladly accept. And it's just such a nice line, because you can say, hey, I love cats too, or hey, I see that you like cats, or whatever. Like, it's just such a fun way to open a conversation. And she's just left that little carrot there to know that who's actually bothered to read her profile. And I think that's kind of fun. But in terms of, in all seriousness, coming back to how you should do that, have a look at the articles that person has written, have a look at the posts that they've made, have a look at their recent activity, because you might be able to say, look, I read your article about, the initiatives that you've got going on in your company. Like, that's amazing. I'd love to connect here on LinkedIn. Look at the comments that they've made. Perhaps they've put up posts. And also the other thing that you can do, if you're not quite ready to reach out to them yet, follow them first, because then you'll see their content, and then you can start to see, what it is that perhaps how you can make an approach. And that is a nice passive way, particularly if you're just getting started on LinkedIn, and you're not sure about reaching out to people. Mutual connections is another great way. If there's a lot of them, they're probably quite widely connected, so it's hard to name drop. But if there could be one or two from your industry or somebody that you've previously worked with, that can work against you. But if it is something worth checking. Mutual groups as well. You can see groups that anybody on LinkedIn is a member of by going to the very bottom of their profile and clicking interests to see what groups they're in. Join those groups as well. Then you've suddenly got a mutual way to reach out. We're a member of X group. So there's lots of ways in which to do it at a really personal level, that isn't a robot sitting there doing it for you.
I think what you said makes sense. The first thing you need to do, in my experience, is put yourself into the radar. And you definitely don't want to do it in the incorrect way. Why? Because there is zero trust when a relationship is at the 0 point. You have to be very careful as to how you approach somebody. And I speak from experience. You will not have a second chance. So even whether the personalized connection request or whether the message that you will have the chance for that person to actually read and pay attention to, you should better take that first opportunity you have to convey your message to them and craft your message very carefully, considering that the higher the person on the hierarchy of, let's say, the organization or the industry he or she is, the less the chances, in my experience, you'll have a chance to send follow-up messages and email. So make sure you don't ruin that first chance as and when it comes. Craft your message purposefully. As you said, do your background research, establish and ascertain a valid reason as to why you are reaching out to them, and then do it. Maybe they will not respond, but maybe they will. And I had such cases in the past, and I'm very grateful for it. But I also failed. Sometimes I was, when you fail, that person will simply not have any more time to spend on you because they are way too busy. They are important people and so on. So you're very correct, and I think it all comes down to earning touch points. This is what they say in marketing. So it's about touch points, appearing before their newsfeed, reading a valuable comment, as you said, sending something about an article they wrote, putting yourself on the radar, and then moving in. That's how I think you have better chances of connecting with them and making sure you don't screw it. Pardon my French. So try to get it right from the first time. That's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they don't accept your connection request, you can send another one 3 weeks later. Don't send the same one, and perhaps wait more than 3 weeks. The limit on LinkedIn is 3 weeks. But if you have sent it and they haven't responded, you can withdraw it and try again another time and follow them in the meantime.
And perhaps in the meantime, you create that visibility that we talked about. You show yourself. On the
And a good profile helps. Having a profile picture, having a good about section, a background image, the things in your featured section that are, perhaps articles or posts you've done in the past, things like that. Because they're going to look, if you send them a connection request, they're going to look at your profile and you want that to speak the best of you, not a sort of a half-hearted effort.
The $1 million question, quantity or quality on LinkedIn?
Well, I think it's all about quality. Absolutely. I'm someone who is really unbothered by numbers of followers. I'm about the last person who'll ever make a post and say, thank you to my 10,000 followers, because I don't see followers as a community. And I think that's one of the most misunderstood terms in marketing is community, because your following is not your community. Your community exists as an overlap between many, many, many things, one of them being followers. But having 10,000 followers does not mean you have 10,000 people in your community. And so I'm very, very all about the quality of the content and the quality of the engagement rather than the quantity.
I intended to bring up the subject of Seth Godin later on, but you gave me a pass. Seth Godin, who I'm a follower and perhaps a raving fan as well, talks about having the smallest possible viable audience is the only thing that you need. He says that, and I know we touched about the Seth Godin chapter before we go live. He says that, you don't need 100,000 followers. You just need, I think he mentions 1,000. I mean, if you have 1,000 people who care about what you do, and they will miss you if you decide not to show up one day, and they want to see more of what you do, they like your work, and they really want to be part of your journey, you won. That's what he said. You won. But you want a community of people who really buy in inverted commas into what you do and who are aligned with your purpose and your values. And I think you are absolutely correct that if you have a following of 1 million people, but there is no alignment of values, let's say, or expectations or worldviews between any of those people and you, it can hardly be something that can provide any tangible benefits to everyone involved. What do you think about that?
Look, I mean, I completely agree. Funnily enough, there's the two things I'll say on Seth Godin is one, the first Seth Godin book I ever read, or in fact I listened to, and I think it was actually the first audio book I ever listened to, was Tribes. And that I listened to 3 months before, in fact, 3 months before LinkedIn Local started. So that's the kind of influence Seth Godin had on me, because I literally listened to Tribes and suddenly started a global movement 3 months later, by accident. And so yeah, I love Seth's stuff. I've read a number of his books. Huge fan, and he's right in terms of the niche marketing message. LinkedIn Local wasn't for everybody. There were lots of people who either wanted to be involved or went to events who did just want to hand around their business cards. And, we were very, not so much now, but when myself and the original co-founders for the first 2 years, we curated the experience by setting the values at the very beginning, which was not for profit, pitch free. And those two, inclusive, i.e. there were not exclusive events. And those, particularly those, well, the fourth one was authenticity, but particularly the pitch free and the not-for-profit really curated the experience for a lot of people in terms of actually coming and being yourself and, you know, sharing stories, not about the selling and the constant hard sell. And so in that way it was curated. Not everybody got it. Lots of people didn't get it. There were lots of people who just didn't. And that was where we said, well, you know, this is what we're building. If you want to build something that's different, why don't you go build something else? And so that was how the experience was curated. And, you know, Seth was absolutely spot on, you know, in so many ways. My other funny story about Seth is that and it increased my respect for him immensely was in the last few months, finishing the book, I was looking for a forward writer, and someone said to me, who's your ideal forward writer in the whole world? Like, who do you want to write your forward for your book? And I said, Seth Godin. And the friend said to me, well, why don't you just message him and find out? So I, from a LinkedIn connection, obtained his email address, and I did email him and ask. And I got a response within an hour, which was, of course, no. But the fact that I could actually get a response within an hour was immense, because I approached a couple of other people who didn't respond, and the no is much better than a no response at all. And I have much more respect in that terms. And it was, you know, it was just like, oh my gosh, I got a response. Like, it was really cool to get that from Seth, because I'm also a huge fan.
I also wrote to him a few years back on one of his blog posts that really hit a nerve, and I was also pleasantly surprised that he replied within, let's say, a couple of hours. You know, the very fact that he replies, I'm not sure if he replies to everyone, I cannot know that, shows something about him. I mean, it shows something about him as well. He cares. I think he cares. It's difficult with such a big following. I mean, I cannot even imagine his mailing list. I cannot even imagine the number. But, you know, I think the guy cares. And he does a great job. And I agree with you. The very fact that he spent the time to decline, and I have no doubt that he did it in a polite way. I have no doubt about that.
Absolutely. It was short and sweet, but it was a response, and I'm fairly sure it was him. It might not have been him, but it was still, the fact that it was even acknowledged was a really big part of, you know, really big part of that, what was a nice experience.
And it's the authenticity as well. What you said before is that about the LinkedIn local and the values of not profit and so on. I mean, Seth says, and we can wrap it up with Seth, because we can talk about his workshops, his podcast for hours. I've been watching his podcast for years now. He says that you have to be ready to tell other people, you know, thank you for telling me that you are not interested in my product. My product is not for you, you know. Or if somebody asks you to change your product so that they can buy it, you respectfully decline and say, thank you for your comments, my product is not for you. You know, and be fine with it. Don't take it personally that that person offended me, or he wants me to change my product. It's fine. You have to be, is the niching as well, the niching of your message, of your purpose. You have to be okay not to be willing to serve everyone. Like they say, go on, please.
I was going to say, and the problem with serving everyone is your message becomes very bland, and if you appeal to everybody, your message isn't good enough.
Another point I've seen in one of your either interviews or posts is, it's a great tagline as well, it stuck with me, is that values are the new geographic borders.
It was actually Lila Smith who I interviewed on LinkedIn who said that, and that was the key message that came, and I fully agree with it, and that was why we sort of pulled that from the interview, because that came out. That interview happened a few days after Blackout Tuesday, and Lila is based in the US, so it was a really important message, and it really, I think, drove home. I mean, they really are. We're in a very strange world right now, and values, particularly in that sense, really are becoming the borders that we now live in, not so much geography, because a lot of us can't leave the geography that they're within. There's a lot of people that are very used to traveling, and particularly, in your part of the world, in Europe, people are just so used to being able to travel so much. And whilst that is now happening again, there's still a lot of people who aren't or don't feel comfortable doing that. And so we're all navigating this new world, and locals becoming very important, but values are becoming very, very important too.
We expect to see that digital communities, especially with the COVID restrictions, will become even more compelling. And I think that the ability to harness or to leverage digital platforms so as to create or to sustain or to strengthen your community is more important than ever in today's
Absolutely.
world. What about you have a book coming up on the LinkedIn Local?
I do, yes.
We discussed it in the podcast. Tell us a few things. What's the point? What's the point of the book? The purpose of the book?
So the book is called "How a Hashtag Changed the World," and it's the stories, reflections, and lessons from the LinkedIn Local movement. So it's ultimately about how LinkedIn Local began, its very sort of small, humble beginnings, how the movement spread, and what what happened in terms of how we organized it, how we structured it, and things that kind of happened in a chronological order. The book then flips to there's about 60 storytellers, 60 people who've shared the story of impact that LinkedIn Local had on their lives. So those stories are from all corners of the world. The stories are themed around building authentic connections, career changes, and also social impact. And so, if you like stories, it's a really great piece for storytelling. I've co-authored it with Nicole Johnson in the UK, and she's primarily been collecting those stories, so she's done a wonderful job. And then the end of the book is really flips back to my voice and talks about what happened with LinkedIn Local and LinkedIn, and what we learned from that. And it provides a blueprint. It's an example of a blueprint for future communities and future corporations to look at the impact a community that can have, and it looks at some really key ways in which that companies and individuals can think about communities in terms of the things like authenticity and social impact, and how that can enrich marketing and connection with customers.
That's fantastic. And you expect it to come. You've chosen also the cover I've seen, which is a great one. I also voted in favor of the more simple and
it was a clear winner, actually, a very clear winner, the map of the world.
And you have like three weeks to go?
Yeah, it should be out in 3 weeks.
Is it self-published?
It is self-published, yes, entirely self-published. So Nicole and I are navigating that whole new world, which it really is a whole new world, particularly when you're trying to distribute a book not just in one country, because we have to be mindful of, like, obviously Amazon is the very easy example, but it's very difficult to order a print-on-demand book in Australia from Amazon, even though there's an Amazon AU, they don't print them here, so you have to
Really?
pay the shipping. Yeah, so the shipping is as much as the book. So we're trying to give people a few options to gain access to the book that within the countries that they're in, which because there's around 90 countries represented in the book. And so, we're trying to, it's just navigating that and all the back end setup. So we're nearly there. And there's a fun campaign happening on the LinkedIn Local social media channels, which is just resharing a lot of the old content, a lot of the old videos. So if LinkedIn Local is something you're interested in doing, I'd recommend following those because you'll get some good tips from some of the old videos that I'm sharing there.
That's fantastic. Let me ask you a few final personal questions, personal, not in the negative sense. And then we have 2 comments from viewers, and then I will let you to your own schedule, Anna. Okay, first question. If you were to choose one single noun, okay, to best describe what and who you are, would it be a community creator, a coach, an educator, a storyteller, a marketeer? Could you?
I would have to say community curator.
Community curator.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's the one that resonates with me the most.
Second question. If you could give any advice to your younger self, let's go back a bunch of years. I will not mention how many. I'm kidding. So what kind of advice you were to give to your younger self, to the younger Anna? Anything to change, anything to be careful, to be more cautious about?
I would say to have more confidence. Something I lacked, possibly still do, but yeah, that would be my advice to my younger self.
How has the success of the LinkedIn Local affected your confidence?
Look, it's been amazing. It's opened up a whole new world in terms of global connections. I was very much trying to, it opened a lot of borders and a lot of ideas for me, and really resonated with me was the impact that just a few people can have in terms of inspiration and behavioral change, and the way in which people use social media. It was quite a compelling idea that we just used to shake our heads in disbelief as to what was happening. It was absolutely crazy to experience.
So talking about inspiration, are there any entrepreneurs that you look up to, or you admire, or you would like to take some of the attributes and integrate them into your own worldview?
Look, I mean, Seth Godin would be a very hugely inspiring for me. There's someone called Naomi Simpson in Australia here who is actually an official influencer. She's in our Shark Tank, which is, if you're in the UK, Dragon's Den equivalent. I know it's Shark Tank she has been on that show, but what I really love about her is she's got a really good focus between corporate and also social responsibility as well. So those would be the 2 I would pick.
Social entrepreneurship is the way to go. I mean, it's everywhere. Fantastic. And the last question, any books that you recommend, whether on personal development or on business? Maybe, I know you read quite a lot.
Look, it's a really great question. The book I think that there's probably been a couple recently, but the one that really springs to mind is a book called Big Potential by Sean Accor. Very much about coming together and how teams can work together to build each other up to a teams together, with a purpose. The other one is a book just out this year called Together by Vivek Murthy, about social isolation and what we can do about that. It's a really, really incredible book, and he's done a lot of podcast interviews this year as well. So you can catch one of his podcasts, but that's and that would be my other recommendation.
What's the author's name again, Anna? The author's name?
It's Vivek Murthy. It's Vivek Murthy.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's move to the two small comments. First comment is from Patrick Kamau, coming from YouTube. Great to be watching this session. Hi, Patrick. Thank you very much for your comment. The second question is from a fellow podcaster in Cyprus, the first person to launch a legal podcast in Cyprus. Christophoros, the question is, would Anna suggest to use LinkedIn Business and pay subscription? More on the technical side.
I would say no, simply because you'll know when you get there. I don't think there's any advantage of being a premium subscriber until you start reaching your monthly search limit. There are, things like profile views, they're good, but I don't think they're really worth the money. Sales Navigator is an exceptional product. And so what I tend to say to people is if you've reached the point where you need premium, you're reaching your searches every month and you're there all the time, and you're doing a lot of searching, don't go premium, actually go up the next level, which is Sales Navigator, because the features that you get on Sales Navigator, and I don't know what it is in your country, but in Australia, it's only an extra $30 per month. You get a whole wildly wonderful available search features that you don't get on premium. Premium is just what you see, but with more search functionality and the ability to see who's viewed your profile primarily. So most of my audience has been built on a free account. You'll know when you need to go up. And if you need to go up, I'd look at Sales Navigator as an option. At that stage, you should be getting quite a lot out of the platform and building a lot of really good relationships. I
think it's clear. Thank you to Christophoros for his question. So the Sales Navigator is like, and I'm wrapping up, it's suitable for building relationships and for B2B as well, or is more on the HR sort of side?
No, so very much B2B relationships. A lot of HR will have the recruiter level. And so that's obviously for anybody who's in a hiring capacity. Sales Navigator is really good. One of the best features it has is it actually gives you the ability in any search result to see the active users. So whilst you might do a search and see 3,000 people, under Sales Navigator, there's a tab that will give you the 400 that have been active in the last 30 days. So you can really concentrate your time to those 400 people who you know are active. You're not reaching out to people who haven't logged in for 6 months. You know they're active, then you know they're going to see the request, and it's a really good way to concentrate your time. It's got great saved search functionality, and if you're going to use it long term, you can build a bespoke news feed just of your leads and your target clients, and make sure you're seeing that. But again, that takes a bit of time to build up. The searches are great. Even I've had clients who've taken it for a month, built a really good network of very engaged users, and then have gone back to free. And they've got a few thousand new connections that are all active, all in their target market. And it's a great search functionality on there.
Patrick sends another message. I believe the future of the world is communities. Thank you for the session. Thank you, Patrick.
Couldn't agree more, Patrick.
This brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest, Anna. I really enjoyed our talk.
So did I. Thanks for having me, Philippos.
Thank you to the people who have watched live on the various platforms, and to those who listen to the audio version on the various podcast platforms. Have a wonderful rest of the day, Anna, and to our viewers, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
I save a prayer for those who care. I keep the faith, but no one will dare to hold my hand until the end, when when all the pieces fall into place. My body's weak, the mind is tired, but there's a fire that heals deep inside. I close my eyes and stretch my soul to gather